it would start, then it would stop. There was no consistency. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Do you feel that she fell through the cracks with regards to mental health treatment and all that other kind of treatment?
Definitely.
Okay, what's up, everybody?
You talked to the people from the Department of Corrections, Rebecca Chavez, correct?
I believe that was her name. Wasn't sure.
Did you, when you found out that Taylor, your daughter, was involved with Warren Chabot, did you talk to her about the relationship, or did your daughter come to you and talk about the relationship, whether there were problems or it was good? Can you tell me about that?
No, they mostly kept to themselves. I knew she was seeing him, but they mostly kept to themselves. So she was working there, and then
Oh my God, what is going on? Damn it. Why is this not working?
just night and day. She was always a loving, caring person. She liked to have fun. She's not the monster that she's being made out to be. That's for sure.
You agree your daughter's got to be punished?
Sorry,
Do you agree that your daughter has to be punished?
has to be punished.
Yes.
I'm sure that's
Are you saying you want the court to give her a chance to get back into society in the future at some point?
definitely yes. Yes. She need help, mental help for sure.
And
Is she going to get that help? No, from whatever happens, moving forward, I don't know, but she definitely needs help.
and is she able to love?
Yes.
Is she able to form relationships with family members,
Definitely.
friends?
Yep.
When she lived with you, did she have friends over sometimes or bring
All the
people
time.
over?
All the time. Yeah. She had many friends.
Did she like to go to Ohio to visit an extended family over there?
Whenever we would go, yeah. Mostly when they were younger.
Your daughter, do you think she's a lost cause or not?
No. No.
You think she could be fixed?
Yes, for sure. Definitely.
Going to take some time though, right?
Yeah. With the right help, of course.
Nothing further from me. Thank you.
Cross-examination from the state?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. You can step down.
Okay, I know no one's watching right now, but just in case people rewatch this, I will just say that yeah. So I did
Yes.
evals.
I'll call Dr. James O'Donnell, Your Honor.
Okay, so yeah, I have a little bit of insight into some of these mental health conditions, and I think that they're using her mental health conditions as like a reason for her to possibly get out on parole. So just we'll give some commentary depending on the how they're testifying. Some of these mental health experts and even family members, why that might
James
be relevant.
O'Donnell, James,
That this
O'Donnell.
old fart's probably a
Okay, Mr. Freeland,
psychiatrist.
the witness is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Dr. O'Donnell, good morning.
Morning, sir.
Can you tell us briefly about your education?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree of pharmacy from the University of Illinois, a doctor of pharmacy from the University of Michigan, a master's degree in nutrition from Rush University.
Previously, you testified at a motion hearing, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your curriculum vitae or your resume was previously filed with the court, correct?
Yes.
What professional experiences have you had?
I spent 5 years as a clinical pharmacist at the Cook County Hospital, responsible for developing pharmacy services and consulting with physicians, nurses, and patients.
Cook County, Chicago.
I spent 12 years at the Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital with similar duties. During that tenure, I switched from clinical pharmacy to clinical pharmacology, research and practice. During that time, I was appointed to the faculty of the Rush Medical College in the Department of Pharmacology, first as an instructor and then promoted to assistant professor, and currently I'm an associate professor at the Rush Medical College. I ended my hospital work at Rush, Presbyterian St. Luke's, gone through a couple name changes. In the late 80s, since then I've stayed on the faculty and have extensive faculty experiences, but also at that time I expanded my work in consulting first with pharmaceutical companies, some government agencies, that pretty much switched to forensic matters and civil lawsuits and criminal matters in courts for various criminal events. Along the road, I've published 350 or so articles, including several dozen book chapters, all of which address, not all, but most of which address the adverse effects of drugs, but primarily therapeutic, but also recreational drugs. And I have edited 8 books. The last 8, the number 8 hasn't been printed yet, but it's still in the printing and final editing process. 5 of those books are titled Drug Injury. The books address issues of both therapeutic and recreational, including amphetamines and methamphetamines and stimulants. 2 books address issues of the science of drug development. And that's a brief review of my 43-page resume.
You worked as a
43 pages.
clinical pharmacist?
Well, I guess when you're like
A clinical
ancient,
pharmacist and a clinical pharmacologist.
What are you currently doing?
I'm currently an associate professor working at the Rush Medical College in the affiliated with the Ovarian Cancer Research Lab, member of the Institutional Review Board for Patient Safety for Investigational Studies, and member of the Admissions Committee for the Medical College. And I also give lectures and seminars in the bioethics course in the graduate college. I described my
Bioethics, ooh, that's
editorial work.
interesting.
Unfortunately, that book is not finished. I intended it to be my last book. And then I do this forensic consulting,
Hey, Frank.
primarily in civil matters, but I do work in criminal matters like this, and that consultation work in civil and criminal matters is throughout the United States, including obviously Wisconsin.
You're in private practice, correct?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Frank, if
You
that's
do
you
forensic
again.
consulting, correct?
I'm sorry?
You do forensic consulting?
Yes, I do.
What's the name of your business?
Pharma Consultant Incorporated.
That's in Illinois?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever testified in court before?
Of course.
How many times, sir?
I have 150
More than
million.
400 times, 40 years.
In what states?
Approximately 35 to 38 states, including Wisconsin. There's, you can estimate 10 to 12 states that I haven't given testimony.
You testified here in Brown County and other car crashes.
Yeah,
involving
it's good to see you.
reckless
Thank you so much for
homicide,
being
correct?
here.
Yes,
I was
sir.
like, I just
You
got on
testified
YouTube
in
and saw
any
that this
homicide cases?
sentencing was going on, and I was like,
Drug
this
induced
seems very up
homicide
my alley.
cases,
I should probably go live right
and
now. So
other
it's kind of an
homicide cases I
impromptu,
have testified and testified in
but this
death
is pretty
penalty
interesting.
hearings. Testified in most of the criminal testimony is in things like DWI and aggravated OWI or drug induced homicide by vehicle, or selling drugs to people that kill the people and they arrest the person that sell or give the drug to them.
Have you
So
testified
this is
in
like a
state and
pharmaceutical
federal courts?
guy that's testifying
I
for the
have,
defense right
including in
now.
Wisconsin.
Have you testified for private defense attorneys, for prosecutors, for U.S. attorneys?
Yes, yes, and yes.
The topics that you've testified about, can you briefly tell me about that?
It's
Taylor's
in civil
having a
matters.
rough
It's,
day. It looks like.
Did the drug cause an injury or not? If so, how did the drug cause an injury? What could have been done to avoid the injury? Within civil matters, since I'm also a pharmacist, I evaluate whether or not the pharmacist committed errors, violated standard of practice, if their error or violation caused injury to patient who got the wrong drug with the wrong directions or was not cautioned about an interaction between one or the other
Oh.
drug. Those are the only cases I testify
I
in the
appreciate
standard
you.
of care of a health professional.
Have you worked with drug testing as well?
I've done that in my
Yeah, it's kind of hard to
training
get me on the block
for a
sometimes.
period in a research
So thank you for
sabbatical
the support.
40 years ago.
100%.
I don't do drug testing. I do interpret drug testing. That's done in a toxicology laboratory or a hospital laboratory to evaluate
This guy
that
must be like
toxicology
testifying
results into
say
a clinical
that
context.
whatever she was on that
that
day
those
probably
numbers
messed her up a
mean
lot,
in
I
terms
bet.
of
But we'll see.
what effect it would have on the individual from whom the samples were drawn for the toxicology testing. And I have also given lectures on principles of toxicology in a graduate college.
Have you dealt with pharmacokinetics and detection periods?
I don't even know what that
Yes,
is.
pharmacokinetics is part of pharmacology. It is what the body does to the drug, and detection
Okay.
period,
Thank you,
by
Doctor.
definition, is how long the drug
I
can
don't
be
think this was premeditated. Well,
assessed, analyzed in various body fluid.
I don't know.
Be it either blood,
but I think
saliva,
because they're trying to say that she
and
has
urine
like
being the
mental
most
health
common,
issues, that they're going
urine
to try to
being
get
the
her Because basically this is for whether
matrix
or
of
not she's
biologic
going to have
sample that,
parole.
for which
options.
the longest detection
So,
period exists.
I think that premeditation is probably like a mitigating factor.
Have
I
you
don't
worked
know.
with government agencies?
She was found guilty of first degree murder.
Yes, many.
So yeah, it was premeditated, I guess. I
Wisconsin
think.
Board of Pharmacy, Illinois Board of Pharmacy, Illinois Departments of Mental Health, Public Health, Attorney General, Drug Enforcement Administration, United States Attorney, United States Congress, Chicago Police Department.
I think they're trying to decide. I think basically what this is for is to say
maybe
whether
a
or
few
not
others.
she's going to get
Wisconsin
life
Board
in
of
prison
Pharmacy.
without any
That was the
options of
first one I
parole, or
mentioned,
whether or
yeah.
not she's going to get life
Have you
in
ever
prison with
examined
the
patients to
possibility of
determine
being
the
out
beneficial
on
or toxic effects
supervised
related to drugs?
release?
I did that in my clinical practice in both the Cook County Hospital and Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital. With a period of about 20 years, I've done that in my forensic practice. And indeed, one of the other things I do is I do private consulting
Frank.
outside of any type of litigation for patients who are seeking
Yeah, Greg defends that she planned to have
answers
sex
or
with this circumstance.
assistance.
I mean,
on
maybe,
medication
but if she
management,
did, it was
and
probably
sometimes
when she was
patients are
super
referred to me by
insane.
their
I mean, I think
physicians
she's
to
pretty
help
crazy. Obviously, I mean, she
solve their
like decapitated
puzzles,
someone and
solve
then
their
like,
problems.
you know, cuddled with his
Now,
body. Like, you
with
have to be
regards
crazy
to
to
this
do that.
case, you were retained by the defense, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what did the defense, what did I ask you to do as far as services in this case?
You asked me to evaluate the matter, evaluate this Schabusiness chronic and acute drug use related to the homicide.
I love her name so much.
Evaluate, review, and to do so to review police reports, videos, autopsy, toxicology of the victim, pre-sentence. I've read since then pre-sentence investigation reports. I did interview Miss Taylor, the defendant, before the hearing I was here for. I think it was in June or July. And I provided you with my opinions as to her drug use, her drug history, my assessment as to the toxicity from primarily an intense, high dose, almost daily intravenous methamphetamine use on
Yes,
her
I concur.
brain and her
Don't do drugs and
behavior,
meet strange women
and
and men,
also
for sure.
reviewing her
That is one way to not get
psychological and
murdered.
psychiatric history, what effects those her methamphetamine use would have on her mental illnesses that she was diagnosed with.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't do it, the mental illness diagnosis that was done by mental health professionals, but I considered what effect the mental illnesses would have on the drug use and vice versa, because that's part of what I do. We look at the drug, but again, get the clinical context. So what is this drug use, either whether it's quantified, actually measured in the exact amounts, or qualified, described as how frequent. Look at any evidence surrounding this as to what or how the drug use affects an individual's life, and then take into that, incorporate the clinical context of prior psychiatric treatment, psychological and psychiatric diagnosis.
Yeah, meth is like not good for people
any
with
psychotropic
psychosis.
drugs for
Yeah.
any mental illnesses, the effectiveness of those psychotropic drugs, whether or not the patient was compliant with the medications, whether or not when they use the medications and were not using methamphetamine, whether their behavior enhanced. So it's a lot of moving parts, but that's what the
sounds really
pharmacologist
interesting.
does, in contrast to toxicologist that just looks at the numbers and says, this is how much was used.
You understood, or you were provided information as to the events that happened.
This is
with
like
regards
she's
to this
wearing like
case,
a
correct?
spit,
Yes,
spitting
You were aware
thing, so
that
she must be agitated today.
blood was taken
spitting
from
at
a
people.
bucket and then used for testing purposes, correct?
That's
yes.
good, Frank. I have also not tried meth,
Um,
but I have met a lot of
you-
people and talked
do
to
you
a lot of people
recall
and
what
worked with a lot of people
drugs
that have
Taylor
done a lot of
Schabusiness
meth,
admitted to
and it
using
definitely does
up
not do well with
to,
psychosis. I will tell you
during
that.
the date of the incident?
Yes. She was using methamphetamine and marijuana, cannabis.
Daily?
Marijuana daily, methamphetamine almost daily.
Yeah, both of those are pretty
Those are
bad.
her
Meth is
words.
worse.
So there were some days she didn't use it, and that was over the course of approximately a 2-year period, with the exception of when she became pregnant, decided and she stopped drug use, but
Oh,
drug
wow.
use resumed after she gave birth. And
Well, that's impressive that she
lost
stayed
her
off of
baby
it for
in Matthew,
the
Wisconsin.
Methamphetamine is highly
pregnancy.
addictive, is that fair?
Extremely highly addictive, one of the most addictive drugs that we know.
meth is so crazy.
Can, based on your training and experience and knowledge, can methamphetamine use cause hallucinations, visual or auditory?
Yeah, you're right. Marijuana
Yes.
can cause
Well,
psychosis,
the
especially
form-
in children.
They can
They say
cause
it's
a
more
form
likely
of
to like
drug-induced
impact them, but
psychosis.
not for everyone.
What is psychosis?
Like
Psychosis,
not everyone
the
that
easiest
smokes
way to
weed
describe it
is
is
going to have psychosis.
loss of touch with reality.
Delusion?
Delusions
It's different than that.
includes hallucinations, just the loss of touch.
With reality.
What they do makes no sense. What they say makes no sense. They're not reasoning with.
They do the weirdest shit.
To use an old term, they're out of it.
If Ms. Schabusiness indicated that she had used 51 hits of methamphetamine prior to the incident on or
Whoa.
about February
That's so
22nd of
look at her.
2022, would you have a concern about that?
Yeah.
What I have concern, yes, I've never heard of that much methamphetamine used
That's a lot.
in one setting. I'd be interested to learn what the gram weight
Can you yeah.
is of the methamphetamine.
Or can you overdose on meth?
Because we have a little bit more context then, but someone, for instance, using 1, 2, 3 grams a day represents tolerance. The subject has to use more to get the same effect. But even in the course of use of using it, the way methamphetamine is used, it's astounding.
The 51.
As far as Taylor
Maybe that's-
Schabusiness, how did she use it? Was it
Astounding.
IV? Did she smoke it?
Sounds like if she took
In
51
her
hits.
usual method of administration is IV.
Smoking.
She told me that
Damn.
she smoked it on the day of the homicide. That was the preferred method of the victim used, who was
Yeah,
also
Frank,
a
I think that
methamphetamine user.
depending on someone,
And that's
like
how-
everyone's different.
That
Yeah.
it's-
Me too with weed. I smoke
the term
weed
hit
a little
applies
bit, but
as smoking rather than
depending on just people's
injecting.
like biophysiology,
Was it your
and
understanding that
their
the
mental health history
victim
and
and Ms. Schabusiness
experiences,
were using,
like that can affect how someone
meth
like reacts
the
to
incident
all
on
different types
February
of
22nd
drugs.
of 2022?
Immediately prior to, and that for some time regularly used method together, and that he was her source.
Did Taylor tell you when she first started using meth?
Yes, when her husband was released from prison, he was a
His name is
methamphetamine
also
user. He
his last name is also
returned using
Schabusiness.
methamphetamine.
They like made it
He got her
together.
started
Which is
on it.
very sweet.
And that I have a figure in my mind of approximately 2 years. I think that release was late 2019.
Oh, this is her
About
husband.
that time.
How does he?
Did
Oh, hey,
Taylor
Michelle.
tell
Yay.
you or describe
see
the effects
you.
that meth had on her?
Yeah, I did this kind of like as an impromptu
We
because I was
destroyed
like,
her
oh
life.
man, this would be
No,
interesting.
not
I
her
should
words,
probably
but with my
do an
take on
impromptu.
it.
So I like
She
wasn't
lost
really
a job that
prepared,
she
but
had for 3
I hadn't like
years.
showered or
It was
anything, but
mentioned
I did
earlier,
brush my
the
teeth.
Saputo Cheese Company. She told me she liked the job. She made good money working there. But when she started using meth, she stopped going to work. Meth was all that she did. She had other jobs, but they never lasted because she was
on meth.
she was either high or unable to go to work. It changed her. She became, I don't know anything, didn't know anything about her personality, which I've heard about today, but she was arrested for aggressive behavior against police officers. I think that's what precipitated her commitment to Nicolette for the
Oh,
forced psychiatric
okay.
treatment.
So she got
and,
committed,
medication treatment.
right? Okay.
She hadn't had that
Interesting.
type of behavior before methamphetamine use. She had mental illnesses. She did have psychiatric diagnoses,
Oh boy.
but those were much more prominent after the methamphetamine use.
What psychiatric diagnoses do you understand that Ms. Schabusiness had at the time of the incident in this case?
Good question.
By my reading, they're described as bipolar 1 with psychotic symptoms,
Features.
schizoaffective spectrum disorder, PTSD.
Yeah, I did see that, Frank. Yeah, I did see that.
Depression or major depressive disorder.
She's definitely I mean,
history of
she's
ADHD
for
for which she was
sure has severe mental health
Do you have any opinions
issues.
to share with the court on the issue of impairment or that kind of topic on the date of the incident?
Yes. Based on
That wasn't her current lawyer, though. She got this new lawyer after she attacked the old
in the
one.
setting of
And this lawyer
long-term
seems to get along with her
chronic,
pretty well. So maybe there was
intensive
kind of a
use
reason
of
why she
methamphetamine
attacked her last lawyer.
in a mental.
Although the spitting mask today, I don't know what that means. She's probably spitting at guards and not her lawyer, maybe. I wonder if she's on any
In the
medication
setting
from prison
of
or in jail.
in this young lady's life, with a mental illness diagnosis or defect that is principally bipolar, extensive use on that day would cause significant intoxication and impairment. Methamphetamine affects the prefrontal lobe, executive function, judgment, discretion,
Definitely judgment.
consequences, and through a mechanism of altering the brain chemistry, principally dopamine and subsidiaries of dopamine and other neurotransmitters. That's the mechanism of the acute use. In a setting of chronic use in similar situations, she's already damaged goods. She already has brain damage from coming into the setting on the date of the homicide and using again. In other words, the chronic use causes over
Diminished
constant daily
functioning.
insults to the brain function, the brain chemistry, the brain substance, such that even without the use of continuing use of methamphetamine, there is chronic damage that is present as a result of that long-term use, such that an individual has impairments to that, again, the prefrontal
He explained that
lobe,
pretty well.
cerebral cortex, deliberation, evaluation, judgment, risk-taking. So on that day, extreme intensive methamphetamine intoxication. This young lady, because of her mental illness, the use of methamphetamine in the setting of mental illness, bipolar, particularly bipolar that's not being treated with a psychotropic drug, the methamphetamine exacerbates the bipolar disorder. And indeed, for the Schabusiness, the neuropsychologist who evaluated her a year after the arrest, and over a period of more than a year since her incarceration, where she has no exposure to drugs, still has this mental illness, and still has psychotic features,
right.
and therefore the mental illness is not drug induced. But in this setting, drugs will enhance the manifestations or negative consequences of the bipolar. And then finally, and I think I alluded to it, bipolar does have effective drug treatments, certainly much more effective than schizophrenic medications. However, if a patient is not given the medications, or does not take the medications, they don't have the benefit
usually the problem.
The therapeutic gains with medications. Under that setting, where we have a patient who has a mental illness and is untreated and uses a toxic methamphetamine, there's even greater risk for a worsening mental impairment in setting where it's just total psychosis and a total loss of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Long opinion, but I think that's everything.
If a person like Taylor Schabusiness used marijuana at a young age, can that
Could Taylor Schabusiness have any
impair
business doing
or
marijuana?
distort her memory?
Yes. What are the consequences is memory distortion, but there's also a shrinkage of the development of the brain. The brain doesn't develop in a adolescent that uses marijuana chronically the way to its fullest potential as it would without marijuana. And part of that is so you're just dealing with less mass. One of the impairments that documented is memory distortion. And then I haven't said anything about the acute effects of marijuana with methamphetamine, because marijuana, my opinion, is you rate these drugs in terms of risk on a scale of 1 to 100. Marijuana is at a 5 and methamphetamine is at 1,000.
I like this guy.
As far as methamphetamine, does that impair cognition and other
Yeah, he just said that.
individual that uses?
Cognition, thinking,
That's it. All
deliberation,
executive functioning, which is frontal
control
lobe.
and behavior, risk-taking. There's even something that I just recently learned, that episodic memory impairments. One of the applications of that is that people get so messed up using methamphetamine, but they continue using it. Now they're addicted to it, but they forget how bad they were during their last near-death binge.
Episodic memory loss
Yeah,
is like where
it's
you
cognition
like forget
and it
episodes
wipes out thought
of your life.
processes.
Like it's not
There's
like
no
short-term memory or
control
long-term
over
memory. It's like
thoughts,
actually just
there's
like
no control over
chunks of
behavior.
time.
Impairs memory.
Methamphetamine, yes, it does impair memory.
So you just said.
Marijuana as well.
Yes.
With regards to methamphetamine, can that drug cause someone to have violent behavior?
Yes.
Yes. Violent behavior.
Crazy violent behavior.
And also,
Dude.
part of the violent behavior is the criminal element of people robbing and shooting you to get your drugs or steal your money that you're using to buy drugs.
But also
yes,
some of it's
violent
super random
behavior,
too.
Violent attacks on individuals, attacks on police officers, suicides,
Erratic.
homicides. It's one of the most predictably violent and aggressive stimulating drugs.
Meth, yeah. I feel like a lot of violent offenses in prison you see
Fair
are
to say that
people
the
using
more
meth or like crack.
Meth you use, the worse it gets as far as violence, aggressiveness.
That's
Because it's
fair,
diminished functioning.
but I would have to be caution that not everybody's going to have the same extent of the violence, which is good because otherwise we'd have many more, considering the number of methamphetamine users in our population. We have many more drug-induced homicides, methamphetamine attacks.
Dr. O'Donnell, is it your testimony that meth use alters the brain chemistry?
It absolutely, yes, it is my testimony. That is my opinion. That's well described. That's how it causes the high, by altering the brain chemistry. It says you do it too much. And
Chemistry is like the
there's some
neurotransmitters, like he was talking about, the dopamine and shit.
literature that describes eventually the methamphetamine users develop Parkinson-like disease because their brain chemistry has been so messed up when they were young that the consequences are that they're at much greater risk for developing Parkinson's and at earlier age than Parkinson's is seen. Parkinson's
Probably just like holes in their brain.
someone with movement disorders and has trouble walking and controlling their muscles.
Is it your testimony that
There's a ton of
methamphetamine
increase
use,
of Parkinsonian
chronic
diseases, like
use
within the
can
last decade or so
create
too.
delusions, hallucinations, psychosis?
Yes, it is.
I have nothing
Wow,
further. Thank you.
that's interesting, Frank.
Any questions?
That's something to look into.
Briefly, Doctor. So I wanted to pick up where we left
Yeah,
off there.
meth
You
is super
said
dangerous
that,
to cook.
Chronic methamphetamine use
I wonder
alters
what
the
happened
brain
to her.
chemistry. Is that right?
Yes.
They might have like sold her. Or
Is that something that
something.
can be unaltered in some way, the brain chemistry?
Pardon?
Is that something that
No,
can be unaltered in some way, the brain chemistry?
unaltered.
With many, in some
There's long-term
in regular
effects.
circumstances, the chemical changes that are induced by a drug
They're
do
both
go back to
short term
normal
and long term.
in certain circumstances, certain drugs. So the answer is yes.
Okay, but so I mean, you're saying from a young age, chronic use of methamphetamine, fundamentally changes the brain.
Correct.
Is that consistent with what you
Yes.
said? Okay, so then that chronic use at some point, is that able to be reversed in some manner?
Any damages are permanent.
Okay. And I guess one of the damages of long-term meth abuse, I think you said no control over thoughts, no control over behaviors.
That was acute.
Diminished.
That was acute.
Okay.
The damages of chronic methamphetamine use is that there can be psychosis, there can be lapses into
Wow,
psychosis.
Frank,
It
that's
can,
crazy. Told the other kids that
And it
wolves
can
took her
worsen
away.
any
What the?
other
Yeah,
mental
some meth
illnesses.
heads would
That's
come up with that
the major
excuse.
risk. Methamphetamine use doesn't cause mental illnesses. Methamphetamine use can exacerbate
Exacerbates,
mental
yeah.
illnesses while it's being used.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you're not a psychologist, right?
No, sir,
Nor a psychiatrist.
I am not.
So you rely on some of those
I
prior
was.
diagnoses
I
and
gotcha.
reaching some of your opinions, though, right?
Yes, I'm relying on diagnoses made by psychiatrists and psychologists.
Okay, and I think you said the principal one was bipolar 1 that Mr. Business had.
Correct. With psychosis.
That was a prior diagnosis that was made.
Yes,
That was nothing you, I guess, are capable of diagnosing.
right. I would not
He
diagnose.
doesn't diagnose.
So, if a court-appointed psychologist in the case found there was, quote, no credible evidence she has an underlying mental illness such as bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or a like condition.
That sounds like a
right?
neurologist.
No, I think it would be no, I would not dispute that.
But, obviously using these prior diagnoses helps form your
She
current
was civilly
opinion about
committed.
her mental
Like, I
state.
don't
Is that
know
right?
how
These prior
someone can
diagnoses,
determine that she doesn't
bipolar
have.
1, schizoaffective
I
disorder.
used prior diagnoses and subsequent diagnoses to identify the mental illness that she had and has, and then I considered the effects of methamphetamine without mental illness, methamphetamine with mental illness, the effect of methamphetamine on any mental illness, and the effect of the inability or the non-treatment for mental illness that puts her at risk for behavioral alterations and also greater risk of impairment and toxicity from methamphetamine use. Again, it sounds like a lot of moving parts, but I hope hope it described it so it's not confusing.
Sure.
I
So
think you did a good job explaining it.
the information you're relying on in terms of the acute methamphetamine on the date of this incident, that's information that comes from Ms. Schabusiness, right?
It comes from yes, it does, and it's corroborated by the toxicology reports of the victim.
So her intoxication level is corroborated by the toxicology results of some
Well,
person?
if they're using methamphetamine together, and he's the source of methamphetamine, and she's an addict of methamphetamine, she's going to use methamphetamine. And that's the underlying basis for me believing that when she said she used methamphetamine during those activities.
Sure, but you have no information about the amount she used
Yeah, he saw the toxicology report.
No, I don't.
or the exposure she had previously or tolerance she had.
I assume she had tolerance. The amount she used previously,
51 hits of meth is
with
so
frequency,
crazy.
I don't know whether I got that in my notes or not, and I don't have my notes, so I don't know exactly. But she, in part of her treatment, she was identified as having methamphetamine use disorder and cannabis use disorder, as well as bipolar 1. I think that those were the diagnoses at the Nicolette Treatment Center, which was not too long.
I mean, she's been like in and out of mental
before
health
the
facilities since
homicide.
she was a
Sure, in
child. Like, I think it's been
2021,
like,
but
it's
in terms
kind
of
of hard to
objective
dispute the fact
evidence
that she has a
of
long-standing history of mental health
intoxication,
problems.
methamphetamine, marijuana, whatever substance, the night of this incident, you have no information.
I have no toxicology tests from her, and I didn't witness her use the drug. I wasn't
Oh,
there.
I thought he said he read it.
I guess she said she's 51 hits. Did she tell you that or?
No, she did not. I just heard that last night on the phone and this morning in court.
All right, but that would be something you never heard of before in your.
I had never heard of that before.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. I have nothing further.
You're welcome.
Well, I mean, it's possible. Look what she did.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, doctor. You can sit down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
How old do you think that guy is? He looks very
No, Your
experienced.
Honor. I have no other witnesses other than possibly my client. I have to talk to her about that.
Oh.
Okay.
That would be
We started late this
super
morning, 12
interesting.
to 12, so we've been going about 2 hours.
81. Nice. Yeah.
So
Definitely in his
my
80s.
recommendation is to break for about 15 minutes and come back and just keep going. Otherwise, we take a lunch. I don't know how much time
Yes.
what we have left is going to take, but that's what I plan on doing. And I guess, Mr. Freilich, if your client is going to testify, maybe I'd reassess that when we arrive back here at noon.
Okay.
But let's break for 15 minutes. Everybody can take a brief
15.
recess. You can speak with your
Okay.
client. We'll come back at noon and decide how we want to proceed from there. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
We're at recess.
Interesting. Well, I kind of want to go throw some laundry in there. Yeah, the judge, I don't know what to think of the judge on this one. It is really interesting. So like I actually did like a video like on Taylor Schabusiness like a month ago, but I realized I actually posted the wrong one. So that kind of sucks because I edited it with like kind of pictures and I thought I did like kind of funny timing with some of them. And then I realized the video that I had uploaded was actually like the version like without any of the like pictures that I put on there. So I don't know. It's kind of lame because it took a lot of time and it is funny. So maybe I'll like repost it after this or something and then be like updated. But Frank says, yeah, great tie on the judge. Judge reminds me of the dad from My Parents Are Aliens UK kids show. Nice. That sounds like a cool show. My Parents Are Aliens. I've never heard of that. Are you from the UK, Frank? I was just talking about Big Brother. I don't know if you guys watch Big Brother at all, but I spent some time over in Manchester when I was a lot younger. And at the time there was like this Big Brother season that was going on and I had never seen Big Brother. And it had this one guy, I can't remember his name now, but he had Tourette's. Oh, Frank, you are from the UK. Cool. Well, hello. Yeah, but the season that I watched of that Big Brother or whatever, the guy that won was like this guy that had Tourette's syndrome and he was like freaking out like so much. I just like remember that so vividly and being like, what is Big Brother? Like it seemed like such a weird show to me. And then it was like you could like, watch them 24 hours a day on like one of the public channels or something. But anyways, that's just a little, but Pete, yeah. Oh, what? He got a girlfriend from his name was Pete. Cute. His girlfriend from the show died not long back. Oh, well, R.I.P. I didn't know he started dating someone. Was that during that season that he met someone that he started dating? Yeah, a new season of Big Brother just started. I think they're on like day 45 right now. Like over in the States. So I've been kind of watching. That's like that's pretty much the only TV that I watch is Big Brother and Sister Wives and true crime bullshit. So but yeah, so I'll look into Pete or Frank. You must be like good at researching stuff if you're all the way over in like the UK with the information that you have. It sounds like you've done a lot of like checking up on this Delphi stuff. Oh no. Channel 4. I can't think of her name, but she was always moaning, it's too cold, I can't eat this. She was very troubled. Oh, well, I don't mean to say anything, but that sounds like, that kind of tracks, like if you think about, maybe someone who Pete might date, but how did she die? That's too bad. Yeah, right now in the house, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if you guys watch Survivor at all. I don't really, but Siri Fields, apparently she's like some like Survivor champion, but she's on the Big Brother season and like her son is also in the house and it's like a secret. So like they don't tell anyone that they're related, but like some people have kind of found out. So that's kind of like their special twist this year. Anyways, I'll stop talking about Big Brother. But yeah, I didn't like I said, like when I got onto YouTube today, I was like, oh shit, this sentencing is going on. And I remember thinking when I was doing the video that it would be like really interesting to see the sentencing. So like before I decided to go on, like they'd interviewed her dad. And this is like now Taylor Schabusiness that I'm talking about. Pink says this is about Pete's girlfriend. I'm not sure, but I know she was always in the news with mental health issues. She was doing well, and then they announced she died. That's pretty sad. I bet she, yeah, maybe drugs or maybe suicide. But yeah, so before the pharmaceuticologist dude that just testified was on, they interviewed Taylor's dad. I think his name is Art or like Artulo, and then her grandma, and I can't remember her grandma's name. And that's like when I started catching it. So I don't know like when they started if I had missed like a bunch of testimony already. But I was hoping they would like talk to a psychologist, but it does sound interesting right now because I don't know. I feel like the prosecution probably went first, right? And then now is the defense going to call people, or maybe the defense called people already, and then or the prosecution, sorry. The defense just got done questioning. They said that they're maybe going to question her, which would be super, super interesting to watch. I really hope that happens. And then, so I don't know if the prosecution will put anyone up after that or if they already did, but it sounds like the psychologist that was court appointed, and I was going to say this while I was watching it too, like determined that there was no underlying health conditions, like or mental health conditions of Taylor, which to me is a little bit mind blowing. Like I kind of was commenting while he was talking before, like it sounds like, I mean, from the research that I did when I did that video on it, it sounds like she definitely started significantly displaying mental health problems like around the age of 12, like when her mom died. And she ended up going in and out of like mental health facilities. And like she at one point in her like 20s or something got put on to a civil commitment, which it's pretty hard to get civilly committed. Like you need to, I talk about a little bit about this in this video, the video too, but like a civil commitment basically means like the state can tell you what to do. And like, you know, this is like America, like we don't like having anyone tell us like what to do, especially not from the government. So it's like a pretty big, like it's a pretty serious like area, but like a lot of times when that does happen, it's like because someone, you know, has mental health issues. And so I feel like they have a hard time advocating for themselves, especially if they are so like significantly impaired that they're getting like civilly committed. But anyways, at least in Minnesota, it might be a little bit different in Wisconsin, but I do know people that do these types of evaluations in Wisconsin. And I don't think they're trained that much differently from Minnesota. But they like, oh shit, no, I kind of forgot what I was talking about, but sorry. Yeah, she also got forced to take medications. Oh, what I was saying is I don't know if Wisconsin is like that different from Minnesota in terms of like how much evidence you need in order to get someone actually civilly committed. But like when I used to work, like before I went to get my doctorate in clinical psychology, I, you know, I got my undergrad in psych and criminal justice at the University of Minnesota and like in like a double major or whatever. And then I started working at this mental health facility, and I was like, you know, a mental health worker. So I had a couple of people on my caseload, but it was in a facility of like 212 people. And they were like basically people that needed like long-term help, but like they were all younger, and like 85% of the population that lived there had schizophrenia. So like I've seen, and I worked there for 10 years. So like I've seen tons of different like displays of and like symptomologies and presentations of symptoms like of schizophrenia like all over the board, because like there was also like rotating people coming in and out of that place. So anyways, I have like worked on getting some of my clients actually civilly like committed because they were like declining so much with their mental health levels that like we felt that it was like necessary to make sure that they had someone that was like advocating for them because they weren't like taking care of themselves or whatever. Like sometimes it's just like nice to have extra help. But another part of that is like getting someone to have a Jarvis order. At least that's what it's called in Minnesota, and like different states have different names for it. But what a Jarvis order basically means, and they were talking about this, and she had it done in Wisconsin too, is that you're forced to take medication. And that's like an even more serious level of a civil commitment than, like just having the civil commitment without having a medication order too. And like, that's pretty serious. Like, I mean, that's like basically when you think of like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where they like force people to like get different injections of antipsychotics and stuff. And that is exactly what it is. And like they usually give them Haldol or Risperidone, which are two antipsychotics. And it usually is like they have to go in and they have to get like a shot of it like every 3 weeks or something like that. And it is court ordered. And like every 6 months, you have to update your petition saying whether or not you think that the person should stay like on the Jarvis order and civilly commitment. And sometimes people do kind of like come on and off of them, but it sounds like she was on both of those. She's only 25. So for her to be like civilly committed and Jarvis ordered, like to be forced to take medication up until now, she like obviously had to have a history of mental health issues. So I'm a little bit like, I'm really interested to hear from the court appointed psychologist and what they have to say about their finding that there was no underlying, proof of mental health issues. I know someone that has to have that every 3 weeks because he can't be trusted. Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, and it's like, because a lot of people that are like really severely struggling with like mental health issues, they will be super paranoid. And so then they think that whatever medication they do take, that they're getting poisoned or that, and which they kind of are like a lot of, and I can understand why they think that way because the side effects can be so harsh sometimes and like significant that I could see why someone would be paranoid, like that. If you're already mentally ill and paranoid and then you're taking these medications that make you like your body do really weird things. And like, I think they just make you feel weird in general. Like there's usually like a huge weight gain with antipsychotics when they're started and they all have like major issues. Like all of them are on tons of stool softeners. I don't know. It's pretty like bad. I mean, I think they've gotten better over the years, but they definitely still have. And like he mentioned it here too, that they found medications that work like really well with bipolar, but not so much with schizophrenia. So, and it sounds like she was also diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, and schizoaffective disorder like is basically where you have depression and it goes along like when you go into depressive episodes, you have episodes of psychosis too. And bipolar is kind of the same thing. Like they specify whether or not it is or without psychosis. And so she was diagnosed with bipolar 1 with psychosis. And with psychosis is like, so I could see why the bipolar and the schizoaffective were mixed up. I feel like a lot of times you do see both of those together, like, or kind of like a history of those. And, honestly, I feel like too many people take some of the diagnoses like too much to heart. Like, I think that we don't know enough information about the brain and like really what is going on with certain disorders. Like, I mean, and what's crazy to me about psychology is that like it differs from actual like medical school and medicine and like, medical doctors. Okay, I'll go off on that later. She looks so crazy.
Okay, Mr. Freilich?
Your Honor, my client will make some comments as part of her right of elocution after the arguments of counsel.
Okay, all right, very good. Then my thought had been that if Ms. Schabusiness was going to testify, we'd probably take a break for lunch and come back. But given that she's not going to testify, she's going to use her right of elocution. My thought is we just proceed right to arguments and then sentencing. Any objection to that, Mr. Saunders?
No.
Oh, damn.
Mr. Freilich?
Oh, that's fine.
All right. So then.
Thanks, Frank.
Mr. Saunders, you had
Thank
indicated
you.
there was something regarding the victim impact statement you wanted to do? Was it going to be read in, or how did you want to handle that?
I believe now two family members of the victim wish to orally address the court judge.
Okay.
I think just orally as a victim impact statement. So.
Very good. And if they want to come up and stand, there's a microphone right above. If you want to stand right between those two pillars there, they can stand right there.
What does he mean, just orally?
If you could just tell me your name first, sir.
Kelly Therian. Chad's uncle. I basically just wanted to say that there's no excuse for what you've done. I don't care.
Minneapolis represent.
Upbringing, you know. We all go through hard times growing up, at least the majority of us have. You have the opportunity to change that. You have the opportunity to, you know, see that you have a problem. I've been in recovery a little over 3 years. In AA, I drank for 41 years. I realized I had a problem. So there's just, basically to me, you took the easy way out. It's did the most cowardly, weakest things that you could do possible. You know, you meet a person in school, you say he's your friend, you become friends.
This guy's ripped.
Girlfriend, boyfriend, lovers, gain his trust. An innocent person that's very kind, would do anything for you. I believe you used that and you had this plan and took your opportunity when you did. There's no excuse, you know, I don't see it no other way. To take advantage of someone's kindness like that, that's like the most irritating thing for me. You know, you get to know somebody and they trust you, and then you do that. You say, and then you say that you're a friend, you're his friend. You said that in the statements. It's like, man. But you know, I walked into a program and it's free. You know, you can go get help and it's free. All over the place, there's help.
Yeah, well, how old are you?
It doesn't cost a dime.
How long did it take you, dude?
It's either, and the first thing they tell you in there, you know, you want to continue doing what you're doing. It's going to be jail, institution, or death. And you chose that path. You chose the wrong path. They sit here talking about being rehabilitated. Is Shad's mother going to ever rehabilitate from this? No, but you can go to an institution, you can go to prison and try to be rehabilitated, but I don't see no reason why you'd have parole after the doctor had just mentioned once you have so much damage that it's irreversible.
Yeah, I thought so too.
You know, so don't make no sense to me even to have the option of parole to come back
And
gain
those
someone's trust like that again.
Fames, I don't know.
You know, because that is like the lowest thing a person can do. You know what I mean? I just don't understand that. And the biggest thing is, you know, like I said, you know, the help is free.
He should be able to empathize with, like, you know, roid
I'm
rage.
sure you knew you had a problem.
No, I'm just kidding. That's bad.
You know, you can't blame it on childhood. You know, there's help out there. And if you take the path to go get the help, you wouldn't be in this situation right now. None of us would be in this situation. But to take the cowardly path that you did and to make other people suffer because you were suffering
What?
is pretty shitty. So that name Taylor Schabusiness fits you well. And I'm not a praying man, but after Judge Walsh here sentences today, I will pray that you meet the same fate as your idealistic Jeffrey Dahmer.
Hmm.
So have a good life, Schabusiness.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you have your hair looking good,
and then,
Taylor.
The next speaker will be a statutory crime victim, so we'd ask the media to be advised of that, Judge.
Okay. I just want to, all right, they're indicating they are going to make sure that they're not video.
That they're what? Is that a ponytail? Yeah, it is. To me, that does kind of scream a little. Like she's obviously she's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, if you could just, sir, before you start, if you just state your name for the record.
Michael Therian.
Go ahead.
Taylor, I just wanted to say that I forgive you for what you've
Oops,
done.
sorry, I
to
didn't
my son.
realize I couldn't see.
And
Oh, this is his dad.
yeah, you made
Yeah,
a bad
I'm glad
choice,
he was able to say that.
and now you have to live with it. But you know, I'm gonna miss Shad. He was a wonderful child too. Growing up, just mild mannered and just happy. And I know you made a bad choice, and like I said, I forgive you.
Oh,
And I'm going to ask the judge if he can, if she can see the streets again sometime.
oh my God, that's so
It may not be
cool.
soon, but
Wow.
I believe everybody makes bad choices, and maybe not to the scale, but I think there's
That's
a lot of
pretty
hope for you.
crazy.
I think you can make use of your time and be a better person
Mm.
and do great things yet. So it does no good for me to hate you. I know you got a heart. I know you got a mind, and I wish you no harm. And I hope things go well for you. That's all I can say.
Okay, thank you.
I wish we could see his face. Yeah, that deserves a clap too. Now the judge is like, fuck, now this throws me off from what I was going to do.
Witnesses or people that want to speak, Mr. Saunders.
No, I don't believe so.
I definitely was going to throw the book at her, but
I'll turn to the state for a sentencing recommendation.
Thank you. So ultimately, the state's recommendation is that the defendant not be eligible for release at any point onto extended supervision. And obviously, we're here for legally and
this guy looks like he's like
most serious
12.
offense somebody can commit in this state. Really, I think a few points bear emphasis. I'm not going to rehash the entire trial testimony for the
Thank you.
court, but I do think a few points bear emphasis. Really, the manner and nature of which Ms. Schabusiness caused Shad's death in this case, I think is really one of the more egregious, frankly incomprehensible methods of ending another person's life that we've seen in this county.
So she like chopped off his head
certainly in a significant period
and
of
then
time.
like cuddled with his
So it's one
headless
thing
body
we sometimes see intentional homicides where
and like did other weird stuff
there
to
is
his
a
body
bad
too
choice.
that
There
I probably
is
can't even say
a
anything.
decision in a moment of anger or whatever it is to pull a trigger on a gun or to hit somebody in anger. And while that
Yeah, this
intent
dude
exists when
totally
they're
does look
committing
like
that
James
act or
Gordon.
when they're pulling that
For
trigger,
sure, dude.
it's sometimes rather fleeting. The manner, as we heard from the defendant herself, explain how she ended Chad's life. This really wasn't a bad decision. It was a series of conscious efforts. It was continued effort over, as she said, 3 to 5 minutes, as she's telling and describing for Detective Groff and Detective Kemp, pantomiming how she's pulling harder, how she's glibly talking about how he's turning purple, and I liked it. I'm pulling harder. He's coughing up blood. I'm pulling harder. I kept going. I was waiting for him to die. This really is an involved process. It's a method of ending another person's life that really is quite significant, and I think evinces some significant concerns going forward, both in looking at the nature of the offense as we have to, but in looking at some of the other factors the court's to consider, and which I'll be commenting on earlier. It's really one of the most horrific ways to end a person's life. And again,
She just
bad to
choked
point
him,
to
right?
anyone, but as we heard,
With the dog collar.
there was
That's
this
not
level of trust and friendship
that
and
crazy.
familiarity between the two, which I think is just really makes the acts of the defendant really incomprehensible in that respect. You have obviously the method of ending his
I'm not
life
trying to
was
diminish his
significant
death,
and serious,
but
but after the fact,
it's not like she was like eating
not
his heart or
realizing,
something.
in the course of this conduct, her actions are going too far, and to the opposite, actually going further, and as I commented on earlier, but not then owning up to what happened, not realizing the impact of her subsequent acts would have on Shad and his memory, on his family, on this community, really, to engage in the acts that she did with his body, which I'm not going to comment on what those
Thank
are.
you.
The court and
Thank
counsel are
you.
aware of what happened, and the systematic and
She like did
organized
sex
and
acts, like
laborious efforts she undertook. Again, that's nothing we've seen in this county. I can't imagine in many counties have seen acts of callous brutality like that.
That's
and
not
I
true.
do think that's an extremely aggravating factor. I recall Dr. Trankita's testimony from trial talking about the amount of effort and volition and choice that would have to be done to undergo what the defendant did.
Once you're in that
over a
act of like
period
committing
hours. This was
murder, like
not
it's just
a-
like
again,
you're
one bad choice, and
on a
in some
different
respects
level.
it was the choice to end his life in the first place. Certainly a bad choice, but continued bad choices throughout the next day.
What's in her
throughout
hair?
the morning and into the night, where she's finally stopped by law enforcement.
I think she was
it's
totally
the
just
three convictions
on meth crazy that whole time.
Ms.
It sounds like
Schabusiness
to
was
me.
convicted of, I think, are just really some of the more egregious conduct that the court will sentence a person on for some time.
This guy's annoying me.
The court saw the entire 8-hour interview in the course of the litigation.
Is it a
We
scrunchie,
saw
Michelle? Okay, that's what I kind of
portions
thought.
of that interview
I'm surprised
as
they
she's
give him
describing this
scrunchies.
to law enforcement, and really we see really from moment one, and that continued throughout the pendency of the proceedings in the case, to her comments in the PSI. We'll see if the allocution is today, but really a lack of remorse or understanding or appreciation, I guess, is in some respects of the conduct that she's engaging in. We saw her calmly describe what happened, at some points being rather glib and
Oh my God, she
smirking
looks so
about
not
what
mentally
she had
okay.
done. As we see later in the PSI, having very little remorse for what she's done.
That's a pre-sentence and investigation.
Ultimately,
Who determined that?
We've heard a lot
I know,
about
I can't either.
drug use and
I'm
mental
like,
health
is
issues,
that
which I'll comment on later.
Lace?
But really, the defendant herself is telling us why this happened. And it wasn't because methamphetamine. It wasn't because of mental illness. She's telling law enforcement why this happened. It happened
Why?
because she liked it. It's because she wanted to do it. And again, throughout the entirety of this case, we see this underlying motive is essentially, it's kind of consistent, right? We see, and we have seen acts of acting out, both in court and to examiners who are seeing her.
She's like, she attacked like
it's
another
consistent in the state's
psychologist
view
that was
with
giving her
a lack
evaluation too, and her
remorse,
last
of
lawyer.
understanding of the conduct that she engaged in. And I think that's all consistent. I think it's all an aggravating circumstance for the court to consider at sentencing. And I want to talk to, because impact on the crime victims is a factor the court considered. And I want to comment on that in two respects. First, I
would stand up if I was
perseverance
him.
of this family,
Or maybe that's awkward. I don't know.
to have the attitude they have about the case and about Taylor is admirable. Is to hear the things they've had to hear and experience the things they've had to experience, I think is tremendous. So the thought of the defendant having perpetrated this act and impacting them in that way, I think is incredibly concerning. I also, it was heartening as I've
Yeah, because
prosecutor
like,
for
did she
many
put
months
any
on this
hair
case and
in it?
really
If it's a
PSI,
scrunchie, does she have
getting
any
to
hair in
know
it?
more about Shad, and I want to comment on that because unfortunately the case we've heard, really everything we've heard about him has been in the context of
Oh,
what
no.
Taylor did to him.
Uh-oh.
And it's really unfortunate that that's the memory that,
So
that
she's
some
definitely
people have
responding
about
to
him.
like internal stimuli right now,
And again,
for
that's a result
sure.
of the defendant's acts
And she's
in
like
some
super
respects,
paranoid about someone right
really
now.
tinge the memory that some may have of him. And I don't want that to be the case. But we heard the good. We heard how he was a good and a quiet kid, how he would always hug his dad on the way out of before he left the house, how he would read and knit and crochet with his younger sister. And that's the person the defendant took out of this world. You know, for all the talk about how young the defendant is, Shad was 24 when he passed. So all the things we hear the defendant wants to experience in life, she still has that opportunity in a confined setting. And simply put, Chad does not. So the impact on the crime victims, I think, is significant. We then look at
That's a good point.
Schabusiness's character. I guess I'll first comment on the prior history, which we consider, and I guess we're also sentencing on. There are 3 prior convictions. She was just placed on probation 6 weeks before this offense.
Okay, so we
Appropriately so. In reviewing the complaints, she kicked an officer. There's indications of methamphetamine or other substance abuse that led to that conduct. She then, in the fleeing case, fled at 80 miles an hour down the downtown Green Bay when it's populated with bar patrons and other pedestrians walking down the street. She's hopping curbs. She's not stopping. She's blowing through red lights. Again, there was an indicia that drug use was at play there. And those were both in 2020. So as we heard earlier, there was ample time in reviewing the materials. Efforts were made to address the underlying substance abuse issues. She was placed on probation, and really nothing of much was accomplished in that short period of time. The little that was accomplished, she absconded from electronic monitoring. She cut off the bracelet and really then obviously engaged in this conduct. So the state agrees that, you know, considering this idea of rehabilitation, and that's always a goal, but in some respects that opportunity was afforded both during the criminal cases and in reviewing all of the materials at many points throughout her life. And unfortunately, either was not followed through with, was not taken seriously. And I think that's a concern going forward. We consider the background of the defendant, and I echo the comments earlier. That's not a childhood. That's not an early adolescence that anyone should have to go through. And that's, you know, it's really difficult.
They testified earlier that her mom died when she was 12.
But when
and
we
she had a
consider
brother who
that
died,
sort of
and then
background
her
information,
dad
unfortunately,
remarried, and she didn't get along
we
very
deal with a
well,
lot of people who have
I think
substance abuse
just stuff
issues
like that.
in the criminal justice system that lead them to make choices they wouldn't normally
Yeah,
make.
Michelle, I agree.
That leads
I wasn't
them to
exactly
become
sure what I said.
thieves or
You're
become
totally fine.
burglars or
When I
become
type fast, I always like
misdemeanant
say
offendants.
wrong things, but
Really,
yeah,
I'm not
he is
sure we
pretty
have a nexus
convincing right
here
now.
between that underlying substance issue or mental health history and the conduct that we're sentencing her for today. Certainly, we've had a lot of litigation or testimony about the mental health history of the defendant. The court-appointed experts called a majority of that into doubt, and obviously the jury disagreed that there was any mental disease or defect that led to this behavior.
Okay, I didn't watch
And I
this
comment on
trial.
it because
I just
it's one thing
researched it
just to say this
after.
person has a mental health history or a substance abuse history, and it's important to note. But really, why that's relevant at sentencing is it's sometimes a nexus or it's a explanation for one's conduct that maybe then would lead towards maybe rehabilitative efforts. I'm not sure in the case there's that nexus between the prior drug history, mental health history, to the extent there is one, and the defendant's conduct here. It appears there was methamphetamine use. We don't know how much, and we don't know, given some of the comments of the defendant after the fact, how much that impacted her decision making. Certainly probably didn't help, but we, as the doctor said today, we've now had this long period of essentially forced sobriety, and we're seeing aberrant behavior throughout that time. Certainly, obviously, nothing to the extent of what she did to Shad, but I comment on that because yes, there are those histories, and rehabilitation is always a goal of the criminal justice system. And I would think most people in the public and in the state certainly would agree with that, that as a first option, as a response to addiction, to low-level offenses, rehabilitation is a primary goal. Rehabilitation, while important, should not be a primary goal for the court in this case. And I say that in part because of what the defendant did. I think criteria like punishment and deterrence and protection of the public are more primary factors.
Sorry about the
But
silence.
it was very concerning to not only hear the defendant talk about the offense to law enforcement, but the comments
I
that were
didn't
made
finish
in
telling
the
a story
pre-sentence
yesterday
report.
that I want to tell you guys, but I'll let him.
Which,
wait
as I
till a break.
mentioned, I think evince just an utter lack of remorse for what happened. And it's relevant, a lack of remorse to one's character. Obviously, if somebody's remorseful for their conduct, that reflects favorably on their character, and the state would be the first to acknowledge when that's the case. Here, not only do we have a lack of that, we have really the opposite. We have the defendant in the PSI on page 7 saying, quote, "I don't have any regrets about what I did, and I do not feel remorseful for Shad." So the state's concern really is more, comments like that go more towards protection of the public and an ultimate question for the court of whether this is a person who should be afforded the opportunity to be released. Because really lack of remorse in many respects is more fundamental to protection of the public and those sort of criteria. And that's because understanding, appreciating, being remorseful of one's conduct helps that rehabilitation effort, and it helps ultimately then protection of the public. If you're not acknowledging what you did and that it was bad and that you should feel bad to the victim who did what the defendant did to the victim, why should there ever be a potential for release, to be released back into the community without that understanding? That's step one in the rehabilitation effort. And we don't have that yet. And really, we have something completely contrary to that. And that's extremely concerning. So in that respect, I agree with the Department of Corrections in the case. They're recommending Ms. Schabusiness not be eligible for release, and the state's joining in that. I've reviewed the defense PSI from Mr. Highland and Ms. Nitz.
This stupid internet.
And you know, they acknowledge in some respects the logical course would be to not be released without the possibility of release. But they come to a different conclusion for really 3 reasons, and I wanted to comment on that. First, they comment that she has a documented history of mental health issues, including
That's true.
hallucinations,
Hulk
ideations,
Hogan.
Extreme emotional highs and lows, things like that.
He just married a Scientologist.
I do think that's inconsistent with the expert testimony from the court-appointed witnesses in the case, from Dr. Engen, from Dr. Seipel. Really, I commented on Dr. Seipel's quote to the doctor earlier in his testimony. I'm not sure if that's the case here. I think it's fair to say some of the beliefs are questioning the behavior that we're seeing, wondering if it's volitional. Some doctors even being more forceful in that opinion that it is, that it's fundamentally volitional choices that the defendant's making. Dr. Seipel found no credible evidence in that, and we're not here to litigate that. I comment on that because if that's one of the bases to conclude that she is eligible for release, I don't know if that's consistent with the evidence that the court's been presented in the case. Second, her intense use of methamphetamine just prior to the offense. Again, I don't know how I don't know how much of an impact that had. Certainly, we heard about sometimes meth use can cause those gaps in memories and things like that. That's not consistent with what we saw. We saw, to whatever extent the defendant used methamphetamine leading up to the offense. First of all, I don't know if we know what impact that had. And second of all, I don't know how it alleviates the defendant's responsibility or alleviates or gives rise to this notion that if we just have her be treated, that this wouldn't happen again if she was released into the community. I don't know if that nexus is there in this case. The third consideration they commented on is her present inability to fully process and acknowledge the act she engaged in, noting that it appears to come from her reviewing the reports generated by law enforcement. And again, the court's seen the interview. Her recollection and appreciation and understanding of what she did is evident from moment one. It's not from reviewing police reports. In many respects, she was leading the investigation. She knew more than Detective Groff and Detective Kemp. She's pointing out where everything is. She's providing accurate information that's corroborated by law enforcement on the scene. So this notion that this is somehow she's not fully processed what's going on, not only is that contrary to the evidence, the evidence we have is that she has processed and she simply does not care or appreciate what she did. And I think that's consistent with her comments in the PSI. It's consistent in her attitude and comments in law enforcement.
One and the same thing, I don't think.
And again, I talked about this at length in talking about her remorse, but that gives significant pause. This was not a person who was psychologically unable to understand what she was doing.
Black Hat
She knew
Bunkers.
exactly
I
what
like
she
your name.
was doing. The jury agreed. And I think that's evident from the evidence in the case. So they also talk about, this denying the eligibility of release is to reject the possibility that there may be advancements in the future. And certainly that's potentially the case. We have no idea what Ms. Schabusiness will be like in 2040, 2050, 2060. But that's just one of the factors the courts can consider. To only think in those terms neglects the other criteria, neglects what she actually did in this case, the moral need for punishment, the need for deterrence, the need to protect the public from somebody doing that to another person in this community. So sure, rehabilitation is always an effort, and hopefully in a confined setting that can be accomplished to some extent. But that's not the only criteria. The only criteria is, can we correct this behavior? We also have to address what she actually did. And what she did, as I commented on, is significant. So really, in light of these
That's kind of like what
circumstances,
Black
I
Cat
think,
Bunkers was saying.
the department's recommendation for Ms. Schabusiness not to be eligible for release is appropriate. There are select cases where the legislature has determined that somebody in the court's discretion should not be eligible for release into the community again. And looking at the criteria and what the defendant did in this case, that's seemingly this case seems to be kind of made for that sort of a result, what the legislature had in mind in crafting that possibility. So I believe the state should exercise the court should exercise its sentencing discretion.
I feel like
to deny
mental
the
illness
eligibility
is
for
relevant
release.
because it doesn't, it makes it kind of like less
I think in that event, the
heinous.
sentences on the other counts are
Like, can you
perhaps
say something
moot,
isn't
but,
intentional if someone's not in their right
I think
mind?
the
Like, I don't know if you
PSI's
can.
recommendation for consecutive sentences on the other matters are appropriate. The sentencing after revocation, I'll just agree with the department. They recommend a year in jail. That's appropriate. But really, the preeminent case is obviously the case we're here for today. So that's all I have to say. There's credit, but we'll wait till the end. So thank you.
Okay,
Credits.
Mr. Freilich.
Thank you
Oh.
very much, Your Honor.
Time
There's a
served
lot of
credits.
information that the court has to sift through and assess and analyze in this case. We've got the State of Wisconsin Department of Corrections pre-sentence investigation report. We also have the Forte Investigations independent PSI or pre-sentence investigation report.
Funny thing.
The court heard some testimony from family members, my client's cousin, her father, her grandmother,
Yeah, I wonder why they do
Dr.
that.
O'Donnell. What
I
we
guess if you
have
really,
here
really wanna
is
make a point.
a horrific situation that happened. It can't be undone. Certainly, the defense agrees that Taylor Denise Schabusiness has to be punished, but she's a young person. She's 25 years old. We can't undo what happened. What we know is
She looks older than
that
25.
she's got family that supports her, that loves her, family in Texas, family in Ohio.
That's
extended
important
family
for
out there.
rehabilitation.
They're all willing to try and help Taylor in whatever way they can. I think that my client, Your Honor, is not a throwaway. She's not a monster. She's certainly got problems, and over time, I think she can get control over her problems, get
Especially
help,
if
get
she's
rehabilitation, and also be
Sober in
punished.
prison, although it's kind of hard to say sober in
Clearly,
prison.
when during the trial, the court
Yeah, I
saw
agree,
the
Frank.
videotape
I mean,
footage,
this is like
and
a lot to
um,
just get, and he
when
got it
the Green
really
Bay police
late in
detectives and
the
officers came to
the
the
case
Eastman Avenue
because she
apartment
attacked
and
her
they
last
made
layer, so
contact
it
with
kind of just all fell in his
Taylor out
lap,
on
and
the
then they were like, "Oh
on the
shit,
porch
you have
or on
like
the
6
steps,
months."
and then had her go back
So he's done a good
inside and
job.
sit down on the stairs. You could tell that she was high on drugs. And then eventually she was questioned and taken out to the police squad car for further questioning.
She was totally
by the
fucked
Green
up
Bay
the whole
Police
time.
Department.
She was like not
But
doing
Taylor is
logical
not a
things.
throwaway. She's a human being. It's not an eye for an eye. I'm very impressed by Michael Therian, Shad
Yeah,
Therian's father.
totally,
He
me
has
too.
a huge heart.
For sure.
He forgives my client for what happened, and he, from what I heard, believes that he thinks that that my client should be
And she
given
seemed
the
to like really take
opportunity
well to
for
his,
parole or
like she was
extended
nodding
supervision
her head at
down
appropriate
sometime
times
in the
and stuff.
future. And I'd ask that the court consider that. He's the victim in this case, and what
Right.
he asks of the court should be strongly
Yeah, the one dude
considered.
that was like all pissed about it on steroids
I have a
was
client
like
who
his
is
uncle
very
or
young.
something.
She's a young woman. She has severe mental health problems. It's the elephant in the room. We can't ignore it.
Yeah,
She's got
thank
all
you.
kinds of mental health
For
problems.
sure. The bitch is great.
They have been bore out in the records from Prevea Health, from Nicolay Psychiatric
Right, since
Center,
her
from Ellen Health.
like this is
She was
juvenile
under a civil
records.
commitment order in
Yes.
2021
Crazy.
and under an
She
order to
obviously
take
was mentally
psychotropic
ill.
medication. And this young lady has a lot of mental health issues that need intensive treatment and counseling over time.
Which she won't find in prison.
She is a dual
I'll
diagnosis
tell you that.
client or patient. She has severe drug addiction issues, marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine. She apparently used it where she smoked it, where she used it through an IV intravenously.
Master and Ivy
She's
is
had
just
problems
whoa.
for a long time with drugs, and that's an issue that really needs immediate attention by professionals.
And this is her
But
not
this has never
on
been
meth.
about
like
an
she's
eye
not
for
on
an eye.
drugs.
It's about
like-
fairness and justice. That my client should
Her
be
eyes
punished,
just
but she
look
should also be
crazy.
given the opportunity to have a chance at the possibility of extended supervision or parole supervision sometime in the future after she gets help. This was one incident. I would argue that my client should not necessarily receive separate punishments, although we have convictions for 3 separate crimes, but it was an incident that occurred on one particular date, February 22nd of 2022.
Yeah, that's a good
The
question, Michelle.
sentences should be
I'll tell you what my
concurrent.
experience was in prison after we get a break here about that.
I would argue, Your Honor, and ask the court to consider the fact that this was likely a meth-fueled type of incident on the date of this tragedy. Shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. As far as
So
looking at
it's
my
really hard
client's
to get a
life,
single cell in
she was
prison.
born in
Very,
Evanston,
very
Illinois,
hard.
Chicago area.
You have to have like extreme
moved
reasons for it.
with
She
family to
might
Green Bay,
because she's so
Wisconsin in
mentally ill
2008.
and
Went
aggressive,
to school here, in
but
the
it's not
community.
guaranteed. So
Went to high
she
school
might
here at
just
Bayport.
like her roommate. Well, they call
And
them
at some point,
cellies.
she went to live in
Might just get really unlucky
Texas
and get
with
her
her
as a roommate.
grandparents,
So
and then came back. I would argue that Taylor Schabusiness has redeeming social value. She's got the ability to do artwork. She's like soccer. She's like swimming. She's able to function
The swimming
independently. She's of average intelligence. She's got adequate written and verbal skills. She's a high school graduate from Cotulla High School in Texas, where she graduated in 2016. She was very good in different classes like social studies, physical education, science, economics. She's had different kinds of jobs. As a
I
cook
know.
for
Well, and
Big
swimming.
Beef City.
When they
in
asked her dad
2012,
earlier, like if
2013.
he remembers her swimming, and he was like,
She worked
no.
for Tour Temple in Texas in 2012. She worked for Saputo Cheese for about 3 years in 2017 to 2020, making about $21 an hour. She worked for Seek Staffing.
I love that's so like
When she was
cliche
in,
that she worked at a cheese
Texas, she was
factory in
apparently a
Wisconsin.
maintenance supervisor where she made close to maybe $32 an hour. And she was certified for employment purposes in sanitation, forklift, driving, pallet jacking, safety locks, things of that sort. So she's able to
Yeah, Black
do
Hat.
well. Those pictures,
Do you think she
the
can get
family
better
sent
on
those
this?
pictures to me and I sent them to the court. I think the pictures show Taylor as a youngster, as a teenager,
That's true.
and
Black
as
Hat.
an adult, that she's got family that loves her, that supports her, that
But that,
she is needed,
but she would
and that she can form
be out
relationships and that she's
unsupervised
capable
release,
of love.
and this is only the potential that she would be released.
I think that
She would have to go up on
Mr.
parole, and there
Coronado,
would be a parole
it's
board that
unfortunate
would
of
have to
his
say,
situation,
like,
but
unanimously
indicated to the
that
pre-sentence writer
she
that
is safe
Taylor
to
was a
be
good person,
released to
kind-hearted,
society, and even
helped
then
others
she would
out,
be unsupervised release, so
that
she would
Taylor
have someone
struggled
watching
after
her.
her mom, Marla, passed away in 2009. Taylor Schabusiness has suffered a significant
So what I mean to
amount
say
of
is like
loss in
she
her life.
wouldn't be let out
She
if
lost
she
her
was
mom,
still
Marla,
shown
in
to be a
2009,
risk.
lost
Like if
her
she was
brother,
proving that she was doing
AJ,
good. I
in
mean, of course you never know, but
2022 from a motorcycle accident. You heard about the other losses from the cousin that testified. My client has a little boy, Mateo, who's age 1, and he's living
Mateo
with Juan and Esther
Schabusiness.
Coronado in Temple, Texas. Those pictures speak 1,000 words. You could see that Taylor was delighted to have that baby come into her life. She kissed his
that's
head. She hugged the baby.
Mm.
She was happy with being around her grandparents. You could see that she was close with her brother, AJ. All of these pictures show that she has had a good life where she got love and support from
you
family.
can tell she kind of looks
The
sad.
tragedy, the fact that she has these losses, I don't think they were ever really addressed in counseling, but they eroded her mental health. And she had underlying problems besides all of that.
Obviously.
My client certainly has a prior record, but it's not a long record. It's not a record where she assaults people and things of that sort.
Except that police officer. that
Looking
one
at
time,
the independent pre-sentence investigation report from Paul Highland,
his PSI.
those writers, Mr. Highland and Carrie Nitz, a PsyD licensed abuse counselor, indicates that Ms. Schabusiness' present inability to fully process and acknowledge the acts that she engaged in on February 22nd, 2022 exists. My client has these mental health problems. She's not getting treatment in the jail. She's not apparently on any medications and probably needs to be. She needs to see professionals to
definitely.
help her address some of these problems.
That's
that
the
she has.
problem. Like that's the thing that
But
I
with
talk about
the
in my
proper
video.
treatment, with the proper medication, with the proper counseling, I think she can turn it around.
And they don't offer that
do
in
great
prisons.
things like her father, Arturo Coronado, testified to. She's not a lost cause, Your Honor. And the writers from Forte Investigations indicates at this time, presently, she's unable to psychologically fathom the crimes that she committed during her mental state on February 22nd of 2022. I agree with that. I don't think she is currently able to do that. She's going to need some treatment to process all of this.
Trauma.
She was likely in a drug-induced
Psychosis.
delusional state at the time that happened. And you even heard from Dr. James O'Donnell, who has a lot of
He doesn't give a
experience dealing
shit.
with
This dude does not give a shit.
methamphetamine use and chemicals and all of that. He indicated that chronic methamphetamine use causes cognitive impairment. It impairs cognition, can cause violent behavior, delusions, hallucinations, some cases psychosis, and a loss of touch with reality. And I would argue that that's likely what happened here. Likely would not have happened if my client was not using drugs with Mr. Therian. And it's my client's fault that this happened. And she has to be held accountable for that. But the court needs to take that into consideration here. And, the court has the discretion to do whatever the court feels is appropriate, taking into account all of the sentencing factors. And, punishing my client for decades like the Forte investigation independent PSI recommends is appropriate. She can be punished, but at some point, she should maybe be given the chance or the possibility of being on extended supervision. Because to deny the possibility of consideration
That's such a
for
long time.
extended supervision in the future is to reject the possibility that there may be advancements in medicine, in psychology, in therapy. Maybe certain medications can fix some of the problems that she
That's
has.
a good point.
This is a very complicated case from a psychological, from a mental health standpoint, from a medical standpoint. And I would argue that my client should be given the opportunity to live her later years, possibly outside of a confined setting. That it'll give her incentive to work hard in counseling, in therapy, participating in interviews with professionals to try and get a better understanding of the crime and the factors that contributed to it. And the possibility of parole, like Mr. Highland says, is not synonymous to the probability of parole. We're just asking the court to consider the possibility of her being afforded.
Yeah, I think
extended
that's like
supervision
important
or
to
parole
like
in the future, sometime in the
reiterate.
future.
It's right.
After
Like,
thousands of
just
hours
consider.
of therapy, after thousands of hours of counseling, after possibly taking prescribed medications, following the strict adherence to the medication regimen. My client apparently
His
doesn't seem
dad
to have
thinks that
much in the way of a violence in her life, threats to people, and only after an extended period of time of living appropriately, vigilantly, could she have the possibility of being considered for supervised release. So I agree with what Mr. Highland
yeah,
and
if they have
Ms. Nitz
any,
have
if
to say
offenders
about,
have any
their
infringements on
recommendations,
their
and I'd
like
ask that
in
you consider
prison
that, Your Honor.
record,
I'd ask
like
that the sentences
within
for counts 1, 2, and 3
years, they
all be
won't consider
concurrent to
them
each other
for release,
as recommended by
especially if
Forte
they murdered
investigations.
someone.
And then I'd ask that you consider granting her consideration for extended supervision, make her complete a mental health assessment, comply with all recommendations, have her complete an AODA assessment and follow those recommendations, submit a DNA sample that's required under Wisconsin law. I think that Forte Investigations did a very good job, a very detailed analysis of my client's problems. They did an alcohol and other psychoactive substance abuse evaluation and concluded and opined that my client has a
It'd be
history
interesting
of
to read these reports.
using mind-altering substances, that that she had some losses in her life, but that she also had some good parts of her life where she graduated from high school, had a baby, had jobs. It talks about the history of using substances. And I took some notes on that. Well, it looks like she started using alcohol at age 6 and then continued onward with using marijuana, maybe at about 14 or so, and then got into stimulants, the methamphetamine, and started using methamphetamine at age 21. You know, using these drugs, the methamphetamine is probably one of the worst drugs you can possibly use, but it changes your brain. It changes the chemical composition of your brain. It causes all kinds of problems. She used marijuana for sometimes almost daily until she got to be 21. So you can understand maybe how her thinking and her judgment and her ability to process was completely impaired. And then you add another layer of the mental health problems. Of course, it's
There's
going to
obviously
create
like her coping.
hallucinations and auditory and visual hallucinations where she doesn't go to sleep, stays up all night, stays up for days on end.
It sounds like manic.
Certainly, she was under the influence of
Bipolar.
methamphetamines at the time of this offense. And
Mm.
she really hasn't had much in the way of treatment. I think
Oh,
treatment
that's sad,
could help
Michelle. Sorry.
fix or reduce some of the problems that she has. I think she's open to it because she tried it in the past.
I think meth can definitely like,
And
you know, like if
maybe
someone has
she
kind of underlying
resorted to
like
drugs, Your Honor, because
mental health issues, like
that's what she
doing meth
saw her
could
mother do
potentially
as far as
exacerbate the mental
using
health issues
alcohol
to a
or other
level
things.
of like
That's
psychosis
how
or
they cope.
something.
You
Like you
learn
kind
from
of
your
described.
parents. My client,
Yeah, you gotta
apparently,
like
according
look out
to
for number one.
Carrie
Like if
Nitz,
people are,
meets the criteria
it's hard
for
to like
substance misuse
be close with
diagnosis.
people
And
with mental health issues,
all the different
especially
diagnoses are as
ones
follows:
that are
alcohol use
severe as like
disorder,
bipolar 1 and
cannabis use disorder,
schizophrenia.
severe opioid use disorder, morphine, stimulant use disorder, methamphetamine, stimulant use disorder, crack cocaine, and that Carrie Nitz, NITZ, recommends that
It'd be extra hard
Ms.
to be like a
Schabusiness
family
engage in
member.
treatment in a residential
I
or
think.
inpatient service program where she can receive intensive services in a structured environment with a focus geared towards motivational and intervention strategies, as well as promotion of recovery and close monitoring of sobriety. It's recommended that these services be received duly with the services to address her significant mental health related issues.
Is this to the PSI?
Providing
Yeah.
these kinds of services and recommendations, it may be possible for Taylor Schabusiness to obtain control of her life, engage in meaningful relationships with others, and adequately address her substance misuse, and which could possibly change the direction of her life, benefiting her and the criminal justice system. I think it would be a tragedy to, as an argument on behalf of my client, to give her life in prison without the possibility of parole. I think that the court should definitely take into account
I think he really feels
What?
that too.
the defense is recommending, what the independent pre-sentence investigation is recommending, and what Michael Thurian is recommending.
I'm so
I don't
interested to hear
believe
what the
that my
judge
client
decides.
is or wanted to do this or liked doing it. I think that she really wasn't able to completely understand or fathom what was going on. And when she
That's
was
funny,
talking
thanks.
to
Is that Austin,
detectives,
like
from
Stone
the
Cold
Green Bay Police
Austin?
Department, she
I'm
was
like
still
the
hopped up
WWE.
on
Are you
drugs.
talking about WWF
Her
or whatever?
mind just wasn't thinking straight. How could it? But she was cooperative,
I feel like people
and
with they like
told
to
law enforcement
they do get in like
what
physical
happened,
fights a lot
gave
when they're
them
younger. I
information
think they just don't know. I think it's
that helped with
confusing
their
and
investigation.
I don't know. Scary.
The fact that she was cooperative should be considered by the court. I calculated the jail credit, and she was arrested on February 22nd of 2022. So through today, I come up with
Nice.
581 days.
I think
credit.
I like Steve Austin better too.
I talked to my client. I don't know how many hits
Oh,
of
wait,
meth she
yeah,
took.
Stone Cold
She
Steve
indicated
Austin, right?
maybe
Yeah.
it was 51 hits prior to the incident, but she took a lot of meth. I would argue and submit that the more you use, the worse it gets, especially if you have an underlying mental health problem. And the
What did
underlying mental
the
health problem, as Dr.
psychopharmacist call it?
O'Donnell
He was like
states,
51 hits of
it
meth.
was
That's
exacerbated by the heavy use of
outrageous.
drugs. And, you know,
She's like,
the doctors
yeah.
in the state, it seems like, other than Dr. Lighton, who said
Is she
that
looking
woman
at
is
the-
psychotic.
Oh my God.
All
this
the other
woman.
doctors seem to think that, oh, my client does not have a mental health diagnosis or a mental health issue, and she does. That's
She
why she was
definitely
under a
does.
court order under the state of Wisconsin for civil commitment. and a
Totally. That's
medication
what I
order.
don't understand. How could anyone say that? That's ridiculous.
I would also argue that the fact that she used marijuana at a young age, 12, 13, 14, whatever it
It's pretty
was,
young.
and whether it was daily or not,
I mean, the
it
brain
likely
is still
changed the
developing
chemical
significantly
composition of her
until
brain
25.
and made her incapable of making rational decision. Her brain, her thought process, her ability to think rationally, all got eroded over time. And Your Honor, there are aggravating factors here, but
What
there
is
are
going
also
on under the?
mitigating
That looks,
factors.
yeah.
And I would argue that Taylor Denise Schabusiness has many redeeming social qualities. She could turn her life around with counseling, with education, support of her family, support of her dad, support of her aunt and cousin that's in the courtroom, with medication management through a
This woman needs medication.
psychiatrist or
Stat. I can't
psychologist
believe they
or
haven't been giving
therapist
her
or
meds. This
doctor.
poor woman.
Possibly getting back on injectable antipsychotic medications to treat her psychiatric and other problems. Get into criminal thinking classes in the prison, maybe have a full psychiatric evaluation, and have a structured daily regimen.
Yeah.
And this young lady, I've worked with her for quite a long time.
Sad, dude.
I've
Look
seen a lot
at,
of positive things
there's
in her.
so much shit going on in her head right
And
now.
I think that
She's
part
like
of it
definitely
has
hearing
been
voices.
the drugs were just clouding everything, where she couldn't think straight and just wasn't making right decisions. But she can turn it around. She can make better decisions in the future with help. And I think there is a nexus between her substance abuse problem and mental health history. Certainly, my client needs punishment. The public needs to be protected. But also a factor is rehabilitation. And after time, after years, she should be given that opportunity to be released under supervision of the Department of Corrections. She'll need close rehabilitative control,
So if they would have found, I'm
but
just,
she deserves a chance.
if she
and-
would have been found
I mean,
mentally
the court has to
ill,
weigh the scales of justice. We see
is
them all the
not
time.
guilty for reason of insanity, she would actually be getting
From testimony,
psychiatric
from
care.
records,
I
from
think it's
arguments,
like-
from exhibits,
She does not
and
need a
from
man.
what
I completely
people
agree,
say,
Frank.
what victims
I,
say,
yeah.
what
She
medical
needs,
theory
she needs to work on
says.
herself first before she starts thinking about
So I would
a
ask that you
man.
consider these arguments on behalf of my client, Your Honor, as to the
But I don't think
recommendations
people
of
understand,
Forte
like, putting
investigations.
people
I'd
in
ask that you,
prison that are mentally ill
go along
and
with that.
psychotic
Ask that it all be
does not
concurrent.
get them
Give her
under the
credit that I
watching
already stated.
eye of
And as
mental
to
health
the,
professionals. So you're basically
revocation
releasing
matter,
people that are
defense would
super
agree that she
crazy
should
and not
receive
treated
1 year in
back
jail.
in,
We'd ask that it be concurrent
like,
to any
to
other
the community.
sentence. Thank you.
Okay,
So-
thank you. So, Ms. Schabusiness, this is your opportunity to address me. If there's anything on your mind you'd like to say before I pass sentence.
No, there isn't.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Well, then, when passing sentence on cases like this, the court has to consider the factors set forth in State versus Galleon. So I have to consider the gravity of the offense, the character of the defendant, the need to protect the public, as well as other aggravating and mitigating circumstances, including rehabilitative needs and punishment and deterrence, and then craft a sentence in each case that's appropriate. In this case, when I consider the defendant's character, I can say that over the course of this case, I've learned a great deal about you, Ms. Schabusiness. First of all, you were born in Chicago, lived there until you were about age 10, 12 rather. You seem to have had a stable childhood. You were loved by your mother and your father and your brother. And unfortunately, your mother passed away when you were 12. Your brother passed away in a vehicle accident, and your dad's incarcerated. But I'm confident that all three of them probably still love you very much.
But I don't give a shit.
Her father's employment was transferred to Green Bay when she was about 12 years old, and hence began the contact Ms. Schabusiness had with this community. She attended Bayport High School. At about 16, she moved to Texas to live with her grandfather. She graduated from high school in Cotulla, Texas, and eventually came back to Green Bay because she missed her father and her brother, which again doesn't surprise me any because, as I've indicated, I think they both love her very much. She's worked.
That would have been pretty amazing.
I read
Frank.
over the pre-sentence investigation report that I ordered, and that outlines some work
She's like,
experience
my
that she
hair's
has. I think
ready
that's a
for
favorable
party
character trait
time.
because, quite frankly, not everyone that lives in this community does work, and I think it indicates someone who who wants to get out and support themselves and not make anybody else do it.
That's nice that you said that.
But that reflects on character. She has a limited court record. Certainly we have pretty much the entire extent of her criminal record in front of us here today. But it's a limited record that reflects on character.
She's not a frequent
She's
flyer.
got a family who cares about her. And although sometimes I think people take that for granted, if you sit in this courtroom long enough, you'll realize
Yeah,
you
it's a
should
big
never
deal.
take your family for granted, because so many people come in sitting in that chair in an orange jumpsuit and have absolutely no one
Especially
who will
people with
come in and
mental
say,
illness. Yeah.
I'm with her. And that takes a little bit of fortitude to come in and do that. And frankly, today she's got extended family that comes in and does that for her, because her direct family are unable to do that for various reasons. And so I think that speaks to Ms. Schabusiness's character, because there's people in this world who find value and worth in her, that they're willing to come in and stand behind her. So I think that reflects on character. I'm cognizant of the fact that she began using drugs at a very young age, marijuana at age 12, cocaine at around 18, and methamphetamine at around 18 as well. And we've heard a lot of testimony about drug usage. I don't have any doubt that that has an impact on how people conduct their lives and behave from moment to
Yeah,
moment.
he's not going to take that into account, though.
But quite frankly, as far as this incident and these events go, I think I've spoken to this already in prior hearings, but the fact of the matter is, when I watched the interview with law enforcement shortly after these events, I observed someone who was lucid, understanding what was going on, was tracking what was being asked of her, answers were tracking.
Just because someone
Everything
tracks
seemed
doesn't mean
to
they're
be
not
together
crazy.
at that moment.
No. You don't need to be disorganized to be crazy.
I don't really see the influence of drugs now. It doesn't mean it's not there.
Dude,
But I
what?
didn't
She
see it
fucking
in
cut the
that
dude's
interview,
heads
which is
off
the
and like
most-
cuddle it with his body.
the
She was
most,
definitely on drugs.
the most close proximity to the events of this night that we have is that interview. And right then and there, she seemed to be very lucid in what she was doing. But I don't doubt. But there's a long
Thanks,
history of drug
Michelle.
use,
I appreciate
serious drug
you.
use. Methamphetamine is a plague in this community, and it seeped into this case as well. And it's something that we have to constantly fight against. It's not a battle that the system wins often, but we're making some headway. And every little step we take is perhaps one life that can be saved as a result of
She's
that
like,
drug
what the fuck does this have
coming
to
into
do
this
with
community.
me?
But it's a big problem.
Yeah, see
And
you,
it is in
Michelle.
this
Thank
case.
you. Thank you so much.
I've heard about Ms. Schabusiness's mental
I
health
see, yeah.
history. I've read
Have fun doing your
stacks
thing.
and stacks of mental health records that have come in as recently as a few days ago,
Okay, so
and
what
I
is
read
he going
them
to say
over.
about this?
Which allowed me to learn even more about Ms. Schabusiness and about her character and who she is as a person. I've heard about her son who lives in Texas, and I'm absolutely convinced that she loves her son. I'm going to say more about that
she's
in a
so
minute.
crazy.
But that's a piece of who she is, because she's a mom, and I think that is a title that is a precious title, and it's an important title. I'm also convinced that a person
That's
comes
true.
into this court with their life up to that point in time as a demonstration of their character. What kind of a person are they? What do they bring to the table as a member of the human community? Not just this community, but as a community, the human community as a whole. And there are some things about Ms. Schabusiness that
What about the aliens?
speak well of that. I was a little bit put off by a statement that I read in the pre-sentence investigation report, frankly, from her father.
Dude, yeah, I've been watching that. Her
I said
eyes
on
are-
page
she's
17 of
got
that
super
report, I
crazy
feel
eyes.
like the system could have helped Taylor and kind of failed her as well.
Who said that?
And I reflected on that because it's difficult to understand who people refer to when they say the system fails people. Because you know what? It's not the job of the system. to
She didn't
raise
write
people's
it.
Children. The system tries to do that. System is not perfect. Like our fight against methamphetamine is not perfect, but we carry the fight on. People in our community get into the system, be that the court system or the system dealing with child protection. Really, I think what they're referring to, I don't
I used to
know,
do
but it seems to
CPS
be the government.
evaluations. I could talk
Government
about
needs to
that
come in and
too.
do more
Crazy
to
shit.
take care of people who have gone astray. And I'm not sure that that's the case. Nonetheless, attempts are made. Attempts are being made in this courthouse every day. And to suggest that somehow it's the system that failed,
This guy's
it
nine.
always surprises me a little bit when people come into court. They're coming in an orange jumpsuit and chains to suggest that it's the system that's failed my daughter.
Oh my God, this guy.
There's a certain irony in that. There really is.
Whoa, is he talking
And
about her
it
dad right
disturbed
now?
me when I read that piece. Not so sure it's really relevant to which
Yeah,
happened in
damn,
this
Frank.
business, but it was relevant to what I heard from this witness here today, because I think the system does the best it can. It's imperfect, and it has very much to do with the amount of resources that the public wants to put into the
That
system.
is 100% true.
That's those resources are finite. But as I
Right.
say, in this building,
But
the
what does that
system
have to do with
is
then so
doing
the system
everything it
can
can
fail
to
you?
fight drug use with all of our treatment courts, with everything we do, to try to help push back the plague of drug use that's occurred and that we've heard so much about in this case. So I read that statement. I heard from Ms. Schabusiness's father. He is coming in here to talk about his daughter, who's also going through the system. And I couldn't help but think of everything I heard about Ms. Schabusiness's son, because it seems to be a cycle. It seems to be just a circle. It's coming around again. So that if he ever finds himself in the situation that his mother finds himself in, where she's the only one he's got left to come in and speak for him, again, I guess it's the system that's done something, but it all starts, frankly, at somebody's home and what they have to offer to their children. And so anyways, I reflect on that, but I'm also convinced that, no one is responsible for where they come from, but you are responsible for where you're going. So there's a lot of tragedy that has occurred in Ms. Schabusiness's life. There really is. I've already reflected on some of that. And it almost seems as if you could apply the phrase, she never had a chance, to Ms. Schabusiness.
What?
And
Jordan?
but as I said, you're not responsible for where you come from, but you are responsible for the choices you make about where you're going. And Mr. Business has got to be held responsible for that. And this is the ending of a process that is doing just that. At the same time, I'm absolutely convinced that irrespective of the sentence that Ms. Schabusiness gets, which in light of these charges is going to be a life sentence, every human being has the ability to move forward and find meaning in their life. And Ms. Schabusiness has that opportunity, just like anybody else in this courtroom. She has the ability to do that, and I certainly hope that for her. But all of those things I reflect on when I consider the character of this defendant.
He's going to say
Next, I move on to
without
the gravity of the offense. And I sit in this chair often, and I address situations where people have been have lost their lives, or people have been violated terribly. And I always indicate that really the offense in this case can't be overstated. And that seems very appropriate to say that in most cases when there's been such a death or a violation. But in this case, it seems different. In this case, you seem to run out of superlatives when describing what happened in this case. You really do. The list of superlatives don't seem to measure up to what you see, what you hear about, and what we heard about in the trial. This crime offends human decency, it offends human dignity, and it offends the human community. It really does. When someone loses their life needlessly, it's tragic. It really is. It's tragic for family and friends and community. When life is taken from a person in the fashion that it was in this case, where the victim's remains are cut up and packaged in containers, it's difficult to identify a human nature in those activities. It really is.
She's like,
It's very troubling.
did what?
It's difficult to
I
recognize
did
the general
what?
belonging that most people have for their community. It's difficult to recognize community in anything that happened in this case. This is a small community that we live in, where the web of relationships almost encompass everyone who lives here, such that people look out for each other and care when something bad happens to one of our members. And in a broader sense, the community we exist in is the human community, as I've reflected on, and these actions are foreign to all of that community, and they shock the community beyond the ability to adequately express in words. They really do, and that's the gravity of this.
This guy's like trying to pretend to be like a humanist, like hiding behind
there
like
aren't
I don't know.
superlatives for it. There aren't really words for it.
It's like,
get a
dude,
sense
yeah,
of it.
the shit that she did was super fucked up and crazy because she's
Feel for
fucking
it,
crazy.
but there's no really way to express the gravity of this offense. So
So,
the
like,
need
get
to
her some
protect the
help.
public is an important factor the court needs to struggle with as well.
Get her on
In light of
meds.
what I've just indicated, I think it's plain that there is a need to protect the public in this case. As I said, this
Put her on
behavior
meds.
seems so
That will
removed
protect the
from
public, I
from
promise.
the human community is to be unpredictable. It really is. And in a place where this kind of an offense, kind of actions, kind of a crime is possible, with no advanced warning signs, and absolutely anything's possible then. Where this kind of a thing is possible, absolutely anything is possible. And from that, the public needs protection. They really do. I've outlined, what I think are aggravating circumstances in this case. There are mitigating circumstances, as I've said. There's things about Ms. Schabusiness regarding her upbringing and what brought her here, the struggles she's had with some mental health issues, and struggling perhaps in the context of those issues with a family who wasn't always as present as they could have been. Those are mitigating sets of circumstances. But all of those things weigh into what this court has to address.
But why'd you say but about that?
So when I consider what is an appropriate sentence, first, I think the law requires that I at least look at least for some of these cases, take a look at probationary sentences. Those aren't appropriate. They would diminish the severity of the offense. But at this time, given all the factors that I have to consider, it's the decision of this court and the judgment of the law that Ms. Schabusiness be sentenced as follows. As to in 22 CF 363, count 1, that's the first degree intentional homicide as a repeater. It's a Class A felony. I'm going to impose life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. I believe that's appropriate in light of the findings that I've already made. As far as count 2, mutilation of a corpse as a repeater, a Class F felony, I'm going to adopt the recommendation of the pre-sentence investigation writer, 7.5 years of initial confinement followed by 4 years of extended supervision. That'll be consecutive to count 1. As far as count 3, third degree sexual assault as a repeater, Class G felony, I'm going to impose 3 years of initial confinement followed by 4 years of extended supervision. That will be consecutive to count 2 and count 1. As far as the revocation cases, I'm going to impose 1 year of incarceration on each of those counts. Those will run concurrent to the other offenses.
None of this
I've
matters.
as I've indicated, reviewed both of the
Like after the first
reports. There's
sentence, none of
certainly
it
valuable
matters.
things in them. I'm going to, as conditions of supervision, I'm going to require no contact with the victim's family, maintain absolute sobriety, complete SOT assessment and treatment follow through, obtain and maintain full-time employment. To the extent there's ever supervision, GPS monitoring, I'm going to require an AOD assessment and follow through, psychological evaluation and follow through.
He just said no possibility, right?
Contained in pre-sentence investigation report submitted by the defense indicates or suggests that there be services engaged in for substance abuse and other mental health issues. That's a reasonable suggestion. And I think I've encompassed it in the recommendations that I've made, which is
Oh, you know what?
evaluation and follow through with
Oh,
any
I'm stupid.
treatment recommendations that are proposed.
I wonder how long
The
life
ALJ
is
assessment
in
follow-through
Wisconsin.
Psychological evaluation so that Ms. Schabusiness can get the help that she needs.
Okay, so
While she serves this sentence. I'm going to order court costs. It's $538 per count. That's a total of $1,614. That'll be the order of the court. I do need to indicate, as I'm required to at sentencing, that now that Ms. Schabusiness is convicted of a felony, she'll lose her right to vote until it's given back to her by the governor or by state law, and she may not possess firearm or wear body armor. Any other record
Body
you'd like me
armor,
to
really?
make, Mr. Saunders?
No.
Mr. Freilich, any other record?
Your Honor, the 581 days credit for time served.
Any objection to that?
No, and there's an additional 60 days on the revocation
Oh.
case.
No objection to that.
nice.
581 days credit on the first case, and then on the
Look at she's
revocation
talking to
cases,
someone in her head.
60
She's
days
like,
credit.
yeah, no, yes, no.
And that'll be the order of the court. Then, Mr. Freilich, you can go over your client's appeal rights with her.
Yes, I will.
And with that, then, this matter is now concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dude, it's pretty unbelievable that I'm really surprised at that sentence a little bit. But yeah, so like I referenced, maybe I'll post that other video. I'll see if I can find it. Like I said, I'm like traveling right now, which is like why my camera keeps kind of going in and out. But I'm gonna be back to my like normal digs like early next week. So hopefully, yeah, it won't be too annoying until then. But it definitely was having issues yesterday, and then today it like kicked me off, and I still haven't figured it out. But oh, thank you, Evolved Madame. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to make more content. I'm trying to be better about like getting on like a little bit of a schedule, but yeah. But yeah, I am. So yeah, maybe I'll look for that other video and try to like upload that with like the actual like pictures that I made with the video that I talk about this. This is before her sentencing. So I don't know, maybe I'll make like a little update too with kind of my reactions to the sentencing, because it's just, it's like, okay, like I don't think people understand what actually happens like within the prison systems in terms of mental health services, and like what it actually means like when you find someone like not guilty by reason of insanity, and like how that differently affects what someone does and how they're dealt with like within the prison system, and like while they're just through the whole process, like when they're going to get out and when they're released. So like right now she just got sentenced to life without the possibility of supervised release, which is the same thing as parole. And so basically it's just saying that like so at least in Minnesota, like if you get life, I think is like 20 years, and the rule is like you have to serve 2/3 of the time like and like in being incarcerated, and then the other third you can serve like on supervised release, so basically on parole, and then like they'll follow you during that like period of time, and then if you screw up at all like within that third time that isn't served, then they put that like then you get like, then it's a violation of supervised release, and then you get sent back to prison, and they have these like things kind of hanging over your head while you're out on supervised release, and then they actually like they have to watch you and stuff like that too. So like the parole officer has to make sure that you're doing stuff, and you have to keep your like address updated with them and stuff like that. So she won't have the opportunity to do that. But when you don't do that and you're released, then you don't have like anyone working with you. So if I'm understanding this correctly, because this is the way that it would be in Minnesota at least, like she is going to serve her full life sentence. She's not going to have like any other possibility to get out like early on supervised release. So she'll serve the whole time while she's incarcerated. And then usually when they get done with it, she'll leave without having any type of supervision. She's done. Her time is served. Her sentence is over. Like it's over now. But like if you get found guilty by not reason of insanity, or yeah, if you get found not guilty for reason of insanity, they actually like it's kind of like indefinite in as when you'll get out. Like if you never get better, then they'll never let you out of like the mental health prison. So like I don't to me, if you're actually thinking about like the safety of and trust me, like it is no like cakewalk to be in a mental health prison. Like it's not a nice place. It's I think scary and they're pretty strict there. I mean, it is very similar to prison. It's considered like, you know, I mean it's a state hospital, but it's for prison state hospital. So like I just feel like if you're thinking about the safety of the community, and I just don't know if people really understand this, like or understand like the mental health like forensic intersection well enough to understand that like when someone isn't getting off by reason of insanity, they're actually going to actually probably have a lot more like assistance and help in the future, and they're actually going to be able to be continue to be watched like after they get done serving their time. Like a lot of people, if they murder someone and they get found not guilty by reason of insanity, they end up like never getting off of parole. They're always working with a social worker. They always have the government like watching them. Like, and but like I just said, with her now, she's gonna serve one life sentence. She's young as fuck. She's 25. She's definitely gonna like get out before her life is over, and no one's gonna be watching her. And like the prison that I used to, okay, I've worked in 3 different prisons, and one of them was like, it was Stillwater Prison in Minnesota, and it's considered like, it's actually a super cool prison. Like in terms of like the way it looks like one of the really old school, like they have like, it's actually on the like National Historic Buildings, but it's really gross because they also don't have air conditioning, and it smells like super bad in the summer and whatever. But yeah, they shit, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so when I worked there mostly working with doing psych evals, but I did a lot of neurocognitive evaluations as well. And then I worked in the mental health department. So there was like one other psychologist, and then there was like about 8 other mental health practitioners. They were like pretty much all therapists. And that was so it's like a total behavioral, then there was like one supervisor. So that was like a total of here, I'm gonna stop sharing this. So for the entire prison setting, it was like 2,500 people that were in prison, and there was only like 11 people in the whole entire behavioral health like department. And then like in order for someone to get even referred to meet with a psychiatrist, which is meaning like getting them on meds and like having them set up to be like, if some like for right now, Taylor Schabusiness is not receiving any mental health care. So she's not on meds. She's not seeing a psychologist. She's not seeing a therapist. So that is pretty shitty for her, I'm sure. I'm sure she's experiencing like pretty crazy symptoms right now. And like, yeah, and then she's gonna get into prison, and like Michelle asked earlier, like what about a cellmate? Is she gonna have a cellmate? Like, yeah, probably she will, until she gets like enough complaints about her that they end up like giving her a solitary cell because she's like not getting the mental health treatment that she needs. And something that I like noticed too when I was working in the prison system and when I was interacting with like a lot of the other, you know, not so much like therapists, but like other psychologists that did the same type of testing that I did. And kind of determined, like, in a way, I would say that we were kind of the, like, a gateway to have them talk to anyone that would prescribe medications. So, and there are like a lot of drug seeking people in prison. So there's like a lot of people that are requesting to be evaluated for that. And so that's just the way that they kind of set it up. You have to go through the psychologist and then you get referred. That was at least in the prison that I worked at. Like at least at Stillwater, that's the way that it worked, and a lot in the other prisons that I worked at too in Minnesota. But then it was like I butted heads a lot with a lot of the other psychologists because it always felt like, I guess not all of them, but a lot of them, and I really do feel like they were trained this way, was like it was really kind of like go into it expecting them to be lying about everything. Like, you know, no one in the community knows what the hell they're doing. If they come in with a bunch of different like mental health diagnoses, like don't believe any of that. No one actually knows like the criminality level of these offenders, you know, and it's just kind of like, I'm like, why are we looking at this so harshly? And also, why is it a bad thing to medicate psychotic people? We don't want people that are psychotic to like go back into the community without having, you know, any type of mental health assistance. Like, no, that's not going to benefit anybody. So I don't understand the, like, you know, there doesn't seem to be a lot of logic behind it if we're actually thinking about not just punishment, like punitive type of, you know, prison systems versus like rehabilitative. So, or however you say that. I think I say that wrong sometimes, but anyways. But yeah, that's kind of my little spiel about that. I think I was going to say something else too, but I can't remember. Oh, I will. Okay. So I didn't, like I said earlier, I like just kind of impromptu decided to go live, but I didn't get a chance to finish kind of looking up some of the stuff that I said I was going to do yesterday. And since I've already been on here for like 2.5 hours today, I think I will plan on like just coming on tomorrow to finish up working on the Delphi case. And I'm going to look into kind of those symbols a little bit more. But also, this is kind of like another little crazy story that I was going to tell yesterday, and I can't remember why I didn't tell it. Maybe I like got distracted or something. But over the weekend, the place that I'm staying, I actually like heard a murder happen like across the street from where I'm staying. There was like 6 gunshots. And then I was like looking up on the internet the next day, like about where like it had happened. And like the person that I'm staying with, like went out on like the patio, and like he's like up on like the 14th floor somewhere. So he had like a really good view down to the street to see like what was going on down there. And he saw this car like screech away, and he kind of like saw a little bit of like the he was able to like describe some of the characteristics of the person that was driving away from the scene. And then a bunch of police came up, and I guess like they were like, there were so many of them. He said that they were like running into each other. I was kind of already sleeping, but I definitely heard like the gunshots. But then I just didn't like really follow up on it. And then the next morning he was like, all this crazy shit happened. And then when we were like reading about it, we like found, so they did release the name of the guy who got shot, and he was shot like 6 times, and they sent him to the hospital, and he died in the hospital. And we were like kind of looking up his name once they released the name of the victim. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was like, wow, it's weird. I was like, I'm gonna like talk about that because it's kind of like I'm almost in a way involved in a true crime case. But I mean, I don't want to like, yeah, he called and left a message with the police department, like giving the description that he saw. But when we looked up the guy who died, he had apparently been just gotten out of prison like 2 years ago for a murder or like a manslaughter case where he killed this one guy whose nickname was like Man or something. And yeah, so maybe there was like some vengeance or revenge for when that went down. But yeah, so anyways, just thought that was kind of like a crazy story to tell. But I'll maybe keep up with that and keep you guys posted to let you know if they end up finding the suspect or anything. But yeah, like the guy that I was staying with was like looking out and saw the car. He was able to like describe a car and kind of like what the guy who was driving like looked like too. So I don't know, but he left it anonymously. So but any hoozles, that is an update for me. But thank you, Frank and Michelle, and like everyone else that has come back to watch. And yeah, I think I will sign off today and then plan on being on here sometime tomorrow and hopefully finish up with those Delphi reports and maybe talk like a little bit more about those other murders, like revolving around that case that just seemed pretty insane. So, and talk about some of the symbology as well. I think I was looking into some of the rune symbols a little bit more, and I was going to take some more like extensive notes on that and then bring that to the live too. So, but I didn't get a chance to do that today since I just did this live. So, thank you, Evolve Madame. Yeah, you guys have a good night too. And thanks for your support. I appreciate you, and peace and love. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.